So today's session is going to be on lead scoring, and we'll probably do a couple other things if we have time. But the whole point of these sessions, if this is your, if you've been to these before, is really just to kind of build in public and let you guys see how you can do some cool use cases with Copy.ai. So as I'm going through here, if you have any questions, follow along as well. So open up your Copy.ai account, log in, and go to the workflows section. Practicing is the best way to learn, in my opinion. So this particular use case is dependent on some of the prior sessions that we've done. So I would watch some of those, but basically to do lead scoring, we need some data about those leads. So some of the ones that we've covered in the past, I'll show you. Some of these may be relevant to you, some of them may not. But let me go to some of these. So basically the whole process starts with extracting a name and a company from an email. So this is relevant for us because like a lot of our signups, we only get their email. Like we just ask for an email when you sign up for a Copy.ai account, and we don't know anything else about you besides that. So this very first one is to literally just kind of extract the name and the company from an email. And then from there, what we can do is we can pass in that name and that company, and then we can understand, what is the LinkedIn URL for that person. And then we can take that LinkedIn URL and we can pass it through this enrichment flow, which, extracts their name as listed on LinkedIn, their company name for their current role, their current job title, summarize their work history, education details, location, what they talk about, personal details, things that they like to do, volunteering, stuff like that they may have mentioned, infer job responsibilities, extract technical skills, recommend Copy.ai use cases based on that. So obviously, like some of this stuff might differ for you, but this is the general process, right? And then we know their company because we extracted it from LinkedIn. So then we can pass it to this one, which does research on their company. So what does their company do? Finds news about their company and summarizes it by good news, bad news, generates a list of industry terms. So take a look at this one right here. You can see threefold, looks like a marketing agency. So industry, retail marketing agency, number of employees, bunch of unknown. So it's a private company, it looks like. Finds recent news about it. Challenging news, so no challenging news. So if you're here from the threefold team, good work. So basically what this does is this all builds up into like, okay, we have either they submitted a form or they signed up for an account or they attended a webinar or they attended an event, and we have a little bit of information. We've enriched that person up to this point. And then now what we want to do is we want to score. We want to say, like, is this a good lead or not? This is a brilliant use case for generative AI. Traditional scoring models aren't very good. You pass in a bunch of data, like around their industry, their job title, like whatever, and it spits out a score between 0 and 100. But it's like it's not taking in like thinking into an account. So it's just kind of like a classification model. So like it weights the importance of those things, which from lead to lead might be different. And so like traditional lead scoring models like aren't very effective. But if you handed a list to somebody, say like, hey, here's 100 people who attended our last webinar, tell me which ones you want to talk to, they would pretty quickly be able to tell you exactly who they wanted to talk to. So that's the whole idea here. Like, how can we take the information that we know about a user and then reason like a person would, right? So if you go into workflows and you click create new workflow, you'll end up at a screen, something like this, which is our workflow builder UI, when you just describe what it is that you want to do. And so this is actually going to be relatively simple. I'm going to say, given a blob of data for a lead, score the lead as tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, and provide your reasoning So you add a step at the end to only extract the tier that you scored them as. So I'll explain why I'm doing this part. So I'm going to ship this. But basically what I want here is I want 2 steps. So basically I just pass in all the data that we know about that person. The first step is more like a reasoning step. I'm just asking it to like think through all this data and come up with a rationale as to like whether this person should be tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, and explain it. Leaving room for the model to kind of explain its logic is a really good idea. And plus, like, I like it anyways, because when I look back at the leads that we get scored, I can actually see, I can follow the reasoning, and this happens a lot. So in an actual deployment, I can kind of show you what some of this looks like. So we have this Slack channel. So when people sign up, they go through this whole process. And I can see, so here, this is one of them that we were looking at earlier. So business development director, Amazon at the Mars agency, scored as a tier 1 lead for us. I can look through and I can see the reasoning. So director level strategic influence over a major business line, responsible for leading all new sales efforts for the Amazon advertising services. This director level strategic role, the large digital market agency makes Jennifer a prime tier 1 lead. She has high level of oversight of sales and strategy for the Amazon division. So like this was all generated by AI. And like, remember, Jennifer started off as just an email. And then now we learned all of this and we're able to score it. We can prioritize it. We'll talk about this use case at the end, but you'll see there's a little emoji on this one. So this is like when our accounts team, when they want to talk to somebody directly, like set up a call, all they have to do is like add their emoji to this lead, and then we automatically generate the outreach, the emails, and send that off. But anyways, we'll cover that in a future session. For this one, what I want to do is so we built this. Typically, what I do is like after I build a workflow like this, like give it a cursory glance. So I look at the inputs, so a blob of data, right? That's basically how I phrased it, and that's all I want to pass in. Large language models are awesome because like you can pass in completely unstructured data. Like it doesn't have to be like industry equals this in like a very particular format. It can just be anything. So like they're really, really easy to deploy. And because of that, they're really, really easy to edit and update. So as your like logic changes or you want to add additional data for that you now are extracting from like the leads in your enrichment process, all you have to do is add it to this input, and the large language model will be able to sort its way through it. So input looks good. The second step is analyze the provided lead data, assign the lead score tier 1 through 3, along with a clear explanation of why you chose that score. So there is something missing here. I haven't told it what I consider to be a tier 1 lead, a tier 2 lead, or a tier 3 lead. So let's add that here. Actually, first, let me, we'll just test it. So this step, the whole purpose of this step is because I want an output. If I'm going to integrate this, say with like Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever, like I want an output that doesn't contain any of the logic. It's just like a number 1, 2, or 3. And it's going to be that number 1, 2, or 3 every time. So I can just add that to a field within Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever CRM you're using. And then with that, I can trigger other actions, right? So like if this person's a tier 1 lead, add them to like the Slack channel that's tier 1 and generate this content. Or if they're a tier 1 lead, you know, maybe you treat them differently in like life cycle stuff. So you send them, you know, more personalized messaging because you know more about them. Or perhaps you can trigger something like send them like a swag package or, you know, like whatever really you want to do. But the whole point is like you need something that's going to be reliable, like a 1, 2, or a 3, so that you can trigger those things. Because those actions are typically like, they're not AI based. They're more kind of like just triggered on a value in an update. So that's the logic there. So what I'm going to do is test this. So this is typically the first step. Before I start making edits, I usually like to test it just to see what's going on. Like, where is the workflow? Because like at this point, AI pieced together the workflow. It chose the models. It wrote the prompts. Usually this isn't good enough. Usually this will get you like 80, 90% of the way there. Sometimes it'll get you all the way there, but typically like it's not exactly what you're looking for, and you need like to fine tune the instructions a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find somebody here. And I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to pass this into here, and then I'm going to find, let's see, who is Renee's company? OVEC. Let's see if that ran. Okay, so it did. Not a good company overview, but must not have been able to find OVEC in the search results. But so I'm just going to pass the news. And again, you don't have to worry about structure. So I'm just going to say company information, pass that in. So I'm going to run this, and it'll show me the outputs here. This one should just take a second. So it comes back. So structurally, this looks good, right? It scored the lead. It said tier 2, relevant work experience and development at OVEC, an organization with strong education partnerships and initiatives. So I didn't tell it anything about Copy.ai at this point. And I didn't tell it what I consider a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 lead. But structurally, it's doing what I want. It is scoring it as tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 and providing its reasoning. And then it's the second step is just extracting the tier score. So that's good. Now, I don't really have to touch this step because that seems to be working just fine. At least in the one example that we tested, though you might find that if you test 10 times, the probability might not follow that exactly. So keep an eye on it still. So scoring the lead. All right, so now let's update this prompt. So here, so it's passing in the lead data. So best practice here is in the prompt, any data that you want to ask a question of, and this goes for a use case like this, where you're just passing in kind of like raw data about a user, or if you're doing some like transcript summarization and extraction, or if you just have like a big PDF or document of some sort that you want to ask questions of, like always put that reference, that data at the top of the prompt and ask your questions of it at the bottom. This lends itself to far better results when you do this. It's kind of like a prompt engineering best practice. So the background prompt looks pretty good, but the instruction here could definitely be better. So I'm going to say assign delete the tier score from 1 to 3 along with a clear explanation of why you chose that score. So first thing I want to do is give it some instructions around what I would consider to be a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So say like, label this tier information. And then down here, I'm going to say end tier information. So what this sort of labeling does, and in here, I'm just going to like provide my inputs. This tells the model that this is like information. It's not part of the instruction. It's just like information that you can use, and it ends here. So that in this spot right here, as I would put my information. So I'd say, actually, let's change this. Let's say tier definitions. Tier definitions. So tier 1. So here I might say, let's see, let's say a tier 1 lead is someone with a director title or higher who works for a large Fortune 500 company. This type of person can make purchasing and strategic decisions for their team and or larger organization within the company. Let's say tier 2. So tier 2, let's say, here, let's basically just copy this. But I'm going to say a tier 2 lead someone with a director title or higher who works for, let's say, a mid-market company, say size between like 20 to 5,000 employees company. And then let's say tier 3, I'll say a tier 3 lead, someone who has an individual contributor role at any company. So we'll just leave it at that for now. All right, so now I've given it some information and I've given it the instructions. So now it should have a better idea of like how to assign a tier score of 1 to 3. And it's going to be doing like the similar type of thinking, I guess, that I would if I was going through this. These might not be like the exact definitions I would use. You could do other things too. You could change this to like a score between 1 and 10 and say like, okay, 10 is they match all of these criteria, and a 1 is they match none of it, and then everything else falls in between. It's really up to you, like how you want to score leads and how you might do that process internally. We can try that, actually. Let's try that in a little bit. All right, so let's save this, and then let's test this one again. Let's see if the logic here changes at all. Yep, so now Renee is a tier 3. Right? So just giving it a little bit more information around the way I think, now the model can think along my reasoning. I wanted to do a little bit more explaining its logic with a clear, very detailed explanation of why you chose that tier score. Let's see if just like that little switch changes this at all. Oh, so also within workflows, you can just retest steps. See this retest step button? This is really useful, especially for much larger workflows where you have like a dozen or more steps. So you don't have to like run it the entire time. You can just like test one step. Okay, so let's see. So now the explanation is definitely more verbose. So Renee Spalding is an individual contributor at OVEC, sorting 15 school districts, over 155,000 students in North Central Kentucky. His title of development associate appears to be an individual contributor role focused on fundraising and development efforts. OVEC is a mid-sized organization, but Renee does not hold director or executive level position. Therefore, based on the lead data provided, I've assigned, okay, so that seems pretty reasonable. Let's try someone else. Let's see. Try to find somebody that might be a tier 1. Let's copy that. Paste that in. Which one was this one? Orca Security. All right, Orca Security. So let's pass in the news. Let's pass in other company information. Publish this. Let's refresh. Something's spinning. I think might be an error with like the testing a single step. All right, let's run this one. So for something like this, I would probably test it at least a dozen times. Just like make sure that it's like that you agree with its logic, and if you don't, you can change that. I mean, this one makes total sense. Tier 2, senior product marketing manager. So it's not a director title, but lots of good experience. senior manager at a mid-sized company, likely has strategic influence over product marketing. So you see here, it's a little, this is why I like using generative AI over like a traditional lead scoring model. Traditional lead scoring model is very like binary in its decision making. So the fact that like Jason's title here isn't exactly director, right? The model here is able to reason its way through that, and I actually agree with its logic. Senior manager at a mid-sized company, Jason likely has strategic influence over product marketing decisions and strategy, right? So I get why it would assign it a tier 2. And I probably would prioritize this as like a tier 2 lead. Tier 1 would be similar role, director, product marketing at like, HP or something like that, obviously. All right, so here the tier score is still being extracted correctly, so I like that. All right, so let's test something else. Let's see what happens if instead of tiers, we give it a score. So assign the lead score between 1 to 10. So I'm going to rename these labels here to score definitions. I'm going to say, so I'll say 10. I'll say, let's see, lead with a score of 10 is a VP or higher at a Fortune 500 company. So the way I'm not putting in any like intent data here because I'm actually running this when different like events happen. So if somebody signs up, if somebody fills out a form, if somebody attends a webinar, they've like raised their hand in some sort of way already. I would probably build a different one for like cold lead scoring, meaning like I have a list that I exported from like LinkedIn Sales Nav or Apollo or whatever, and I want to score it across like the dimensions that I extracted from that, but they haven't like necessarily done anything on the website. So I might score that differently. So I'd probably create like a separate workflow for that, or like clone this one and like edit the logic a little bit. So lead with a score of 10 is a VP or higher at a Fortune 500 company who would have budget, a large team, decision-making authority, and influence over their peers at the company, meaning a quick path to grow the account for us. So I'm just gonna say 5. Here I'll say lead with a score of 5 would be a middle manager at a small to mid-sized company. May have a small team and some limited budget, authority to make small purchases for their team. And then 1, lead with a score of 1 means we don't know much about this person, or they are a student or some other entry-level employee with no influence over strategic decisions and no budget authority. They are likely using the tool for personal reasons and wouldn't be good use of our accounts team's time. All right, let's update this. Score from 1 to 10. So I'll say lead score, and let's do like 2-paragraph explanation of score. All right, so let's save this one. Let's go back to test. Let's run this again. Did I save that? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so now Jason gets a 7. Well, that was weird. So this broke. So we'll have to fix that, which happens, right? This is actually good. So let's see. Lead score 7. Senior product marketing manager. So 210 million in recent funding. That must have come from the, yeah, that came from the news that we extracted in like the company enrichment workflow before. Still private. They seem to be positioning themselves for a future IPO, bringing on a new CFO. Okay, so that's that's pretty good. Given seniority, company's growth trajectory, Jason could be an influential advocate. I like that. 7 definitely makes sense to me. So now I got to figure this out, because if I had like systems that were triggering based on, you know, the score of 1 to 10, and this came back as a 2, that would be bad because we would miss out on this lead. So let's try to figure out what's going on here. So the lead scoring seems to be pretty good. Now this one, oh, I see. Okay. 1 through 10. So I only gave it 3 options in this prompt. I said score it 1, 2, or 3. So I just needed to update that. So let's save this action, and then let's just retest this step. See if we get 7 this time. Yep. Okay, cool. So figured out the issue. Almost every time, like whatever you're seeing that comes back, like, you know, I've kind of like seen it all. You can always figure it out. Look at the instructions. Like anything that would be like ambiguous or conflicting with like what you actually want is obvious. Also think of like instructions that you didn't give. Right. So I was like working with a customer earlier today, and the like the tone, they're doing like product descriptions. They're, you know, a retailer, but they're doing product descriptions, and like the tone, like the it would always start off the same, like introducing product name. In this case, we can in that case, what we did is like we just gave it, we took like some of their like other product descriptions, we ran it through brand voice, so we got some tone instructions, then we just referenced that in the workflow, and then all of a sudden it was like magical writing. Like it was awesome, but much more flowery, and like every single product description was completely unique, because the model, like we gave it more instruction on like what sort of output we were expecting. When we didn't give it that instruction, it just kind of guesses. Like it, especially if you give it wrong instruction like I did here, that's the most obvious thing. But some of the less obvious things would be like lack of instruction. It might not follow exactly, it might not like output exactly what you're looking for here. So now we got this one going pretty good. So now it's like a matter of, okay, how do I put this into action, right? So there's a few different ways. Oops, this bothered me. Let me fix that. There's a few different ways that I might see people running this particular type of workflow. Ideally, it's in an automated fashion, but it also probably makes sense, like for an event, you know, like let's say you attend like AWS reInvent or like some other industry event, and at the end of it, you get back like everybody's like badge that you scanned, and it comes in like an Excel format typically. What you could do is upload that directly here. So let's see what I can do here. Let's open up a new one. I'm going to say, call this column lead info. And then I'm going to grab a bunch of these, paste that into here. And then let's save this. All right, so I just dropped this Excel file. So it imports the rows. Looks like it automatically removes the missing rows. And then, okay, so this is the name of the column in the spreadsheet. And this is the name of the input in my workflow. If there's multiple inputs, there'll be like multiple values of the dropdown. And if, of course, there's like multiple columns in the spreadsheet, it'll show that. And then basically this step, I'm just mapping. I'm saying, okay, so the lead info column in the spreadsheet I just uploaded, I actually want to import that into the blob of data column in the workflow. So it'll show me what that'll look like. All looks good. So I click import, and then this populates all this. And then what I can do is I just click run all, and it'll run this workflow across every single row that I just imported. So if you're coming from like, again, like an event or, you know, whatever, you get like the list of attendees to a webinar, or you just like exported a list from Sales Nav or Apollo or whatever. This is a really good way to do that. So now you can see I have all my leads scored. One that's running still. There we go. And then I can just export this, and it'll give me a file that then I can download. And, you know, now I have like every single lead scored, and I can decide what I want to do with them. All right, so let's do, we got a bunch of time here. Let's do a couple other cool things. So recently, what we did is if you go to like Copy.ai now, we have a form right here. Right, so you like put in your email, and it brings you to the demo request form. So the good thing is that we get a lot more form submissions. The bad thing is that we get a lot more form submissions. So like there's a lot of noise and garbage and spam, because basically we have these like mini forms across our entire website now. So lead scoring doesn't necessarily do the trick, because like first I need a step to understand, like, is this even a lead that I want to score? Like, is this spam or is this real? So what we did for this one is build this workflow that classifies a lead request. So the input is just like all the form submission data. It extracts the relevant data. So like sometimes like they like didn't put in a message or something like that. It analyzes the lead info. And so here, like I'm giving it some instructions around like what I would, like what sort of criteria I would use. So analyze the extracted form fields for legitimacy based on the criteria above. Provide an analysis summary indicating if this is likely a good lead or not. And then so here I'm saying like they have a valid name. So it's not just like a random like string, a company email address. So it's not somebody's personal email address. It's actually a real company. And then the message has a message, and it indicates like interest. So a lack of a message is a strong indicator that it's not a good lead. And then it classifies the lead as either good lead or not a good lead. And then this last step just returns true or false. And then based on that, then I can trigger like the enrichment. And then again, like once that enrichment happens, gets added to Salesforce and then sent to like our team in the Slack channel. So you can see some of the results here. So this one came back as not a good lead. There was no message. Let's see what its reasoning is. The domain EHR seems made up. A company name Babco does not seem to be a real company name. So anyways, we can filter this stuff ahead of time, which is great. And it works really well. So you guys can use it and edit it to your own liking, so you don't necessarily have to build from scratch. But hopefully with today's instructions, you feel a little bit more comfortable on being able to build from scratch.